name is 𝗨𝗂𝘁 𝗪𝗂, Master Ventures. And just to be transparent, as I always am, this is my first panel I'm moderating. But usually panels, I feel like pretty boring. And so on this panel, I hope we all respect each other, but I also encourage, if someone says something you don't agree with, please speak out. I encourage healthy debate. I want to get rid of political correctness. I'm sick and tired of people just agreeing to things that are misinformation. I think that we're all very intelligent people on this panel here, and please don't be polite. I'll respect each other, but also don't be polite.
I disagree with that.
Thank you. Since 2012, Master Ventures, we've got a couple different verticals, but our goal is to basically help the entire world adopt decentralized technologies, systems, governance models. I mean, I would love to see a world where we have different borderless nations, where different governments are competing for their citizens. If you just think about that for a second, it'll blow your mind. Massive paradigm shift, but I think that we can hopefully do it one day. There's a long path to get there, but that's kind of our goal. In between, we do advisory, investment, and also building projects in-house focused on self-regulation. I believe it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for regulators to create legislation for borderless projects. I don't know how people expect that to happen, so I think that we need to focus on self-regulating. Do we even need to facilitate communication between traditional financial systems and decentralized exchanges? Anyone jump in? Do we need to facilitate, is there a need to actually try to bridge this gap here or incorporate the two, traditional financial into decentralized exchanges?
Neither exists in a bubble. We have one global economy, and they are both existent, so there will be a relationship between them. In eToro, we see ourselves as a major bridge between the two worlds. eToro is, for those of you who don't know, a global broker who has 2,000 different assets that you can trade on. And we were one of the first to add Bitcoin and Ethereum as CFDs on the platform. And basically, it took a while till we were able to educate our regulators, show them what we do exactly, and what crypto is. And I think that that's basically the way forward, is just knowledge and understanding, because these things have value. Digital assets are certainly superior to traditional finance. It's just going to take some time to bridge the knowledge gap for regulators before they see the value in it as well.
Let's talk about decentralization and assume that we have a more mature market, or we don't even have to assume. How do we get there? But let's assume that we have proper decentralized exchanges that have liquidity, because we build liquidity solutions, whatever. In this situation, let's go back to the question of can we then, or do we need to communicate traditional systems into these DEXs somehow? And what would that look like?
I think the crux of this conversation is that regulation by nature and by history is something that usually starts out local and then expands global. And for the first time in history, we have assets that are natively global in nature. And regulations have been written much differently throughout the world. And there are some that are embracing this technology much quicker. So for example, in Stuttgart in Germany, they already have a digital assets desk, which is fully regulated and part of the stock exchange there. SIX stock exchange in Switzerland is going to have one probably by the second half of next year. Singapore and Japan already have associations that are specifically dealing with digital assets and are also going to be very likely setting up such exchanges. Unfortunately, some other places, United States, for example, is way behind on this. And I think that China is making huge moves in the space as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch how they all mesh together at the end of the day.
Okay, so here's a question. How does it even happen? You guys, pretty much, like the majority of you, have cited on the fact that we need regulation and work with regulators. But how do you expect local regulators to create legislation for borderless assets and be able to successfully regulate that? I would love to hear your answers, because I don't see how it's possible.
So look at FATF. They've already done it. right? They're actually, it's not something that a local, really maybe if the United States came online with the token taxonomy, but that's so far. But the FATF has already released their statement. Within the next year, all crypto exchanges need to comply with traditional AML rules. There's no two ways about that.
But not if it's decentralized.
Well, it's decentralized. People are always going to use the Tor browser and find ways around it or whatever. But you know, I haven't seen a decentralized exchange that really wants to be regulated. That animal hasn't come up yet. When it does, I'm sure that the regulators will have to deal with it when it comes. But right now, they've got their hands full just dealing with what there is.
It's kind of like an oxymoron, I feel like.
Right.
Like, why would any decentralized project want to be regulated? It makes no sense at all. I mean, the whole purpose of decentralization is to operate outside of regulated bodies. That's why you decentralize it. That means no central authority. That means you can't be shut down. That means no matter if head of project dies, it gets going because you've got community. And so on a decentralized exchange, we assume that the servers are based off of nodes globally distributed. Yeah. So again, this issue of regulation to me starts to become irrelevant when we see where we're going. So what do you guys think is the biggest problem with exchanges right now, decentralized or
I would say when it comes to DEXs, the biggest issue is liquidity. There's no volume, right? So that's why I haven't really seen any DEXs. As somebody who's been an investor in DEXs in the past, I haven't really seen anybody who's come through and really solved the issue to a point where it can scale and really fulfill the vision of what people envision as a DEX, right? Because liquidity is a very tough problem to solve on a DEX.
I think the premise of liquidity is the onboarding of consumers, and I think the industry kind of screwed themselves by calling everything a cryptocurrency when in reality most of them are digital penny stocks. So if it had been positioned properly where people could look at it as a new asset class for investing in the onboarding, the onboarding into wallets and into an exchange is still very complicated. Just like in the early days of the stock, it wasn't easy to get onto an E-Trade or Schwab and trade yourself. That onboarding of the consumer is the gap. Even if a consumer wants to, it's still complicated to get into the system, and they need to understand it better. I think the industry's been positioned poorly.
I think also there's a different, I think the DEX is not even that important short term. I think the near future of crypto will be fairly centralized, or of blockchain. This is, I think, what we see when everyone was talking 2 years, 3 years ago, was talking about utopian ideas, how we revolutionize the world. I think everyone has moved very, very strongly towards financial applications. Everyone is investing into financial things. Everyone is thinking around that. I think the key shift is what we're going to see is we're going to shift from, or we are currently shifting from retail investors, which was the bubble we've seen, to the professional investors. It will be not as easy to deceive them in the same way. So in order to do that, we need to get the infrastructure in place around custody, because institutions have trouble moving into the space at the moment, and that needs to be fixed. And then we'll see from there. But I think the DEX is a far-out scenario, and the regulator will have to deal with much more burning issues until then.
I actually agree with you, and we have to realize that, like, New York Stock Exchange their daily volume is bigger than Bitcoin's market cap. So we're still very, very early in. But there's two things to answer your questions. I'm a bit afraid of if we do fractional reserve, if the crypto banks or exchanges starts doing fractional reserves, then we're pretty much screwed. Yeah. Imagine if you are now leveraging your Bitcoin 10 times. There's now 210 million Bitcoins out there, and there's no government to bail you out if shit hits the fan. So if those kind of things start happening that's not really, for me, an exchange and a bank is completely different things. Right. An exchange is the New York Stock Exchange. A bank is what we 90% call our wallets.
Custody.
Yeah, a custodian wallet is what we call a bank today. So some issues. And the lack of transparency and the lack of standards within exchanges. Like, how much money do we actually have in an exchange? What is backed? What's not backed? So standards within exchanges, so I can know if I put my money into an exchange, which I shouldn't, but if I do, I want to know how much of this is actually backed by some sort of reserve. So.
Transparency, yeah. Maddie, anything else? We're out of time pretty much. So, but Maddie, anything else?
I like that idea. I think that there should be more transparency, especially in this industry. And if the point here is to get off of that fractional reserve, I think that that's the way to do it.
Yep, I also agree with that. I think we need more transparency exchanges. But I'm going to just kind of wrap it up with back what I kind of initially said, that I think that the best way for us to move forward, or I should say the only successful way to move forward, in my opinion, is that we create self-regulatory bodies, we set standards in the industry that let consumers and retailers know what are the legitimate exchanges by kind of just creating these best practices and standards for exchanges, something that we're working on right now.